Now, today's story is often referred to as the parable of the talents, which sounds a little like the circus, or like it's a new reality show, Nazareth's Got Talent. But the word talent is a real distraction here. Jesus is talking about money, and we're thinking about people balancing 10 spinning plates on their bodies. Right? But in the church, the distinction is even more ingrained because we know he's talking about money, but we also know that he's really talking about giftedness, right? Wink, wink. It's as if Jesus has given us rakes and asked us to rake the yard. And we're all like, yes, rake the yard. And then proceed to jump into the leaf piles because we totally know that's what he really meant. We want this to be a parable about a 21st century understanding of talent so badly that we're willing to shut our minds to everything else, fingers firmly fixed in our ears. This is about hiding our talents under a bushel basket, right? Talents are units of money. And even if Jesus were talking about giftedness, we'd still be using the term incorrectly because we think of talents as something separate from ourselves, as something that makes some people special and others mediocre. Talents are a means of evaluating and ranking, and a means of hiding from responsibility and refusing to what God calls us to do, because, we argue, we don't have the talent. Which is totally false. A fake picture of ourselves and what we are good at. So either way, we've got the wrong idea of talent. So let's fix that. Think of these talents as huge sums of money. These aren't skills or aptitudes. Consider each talent as averaging about a year's salary. So when one slave risks 5 years worth of income, you know we're talking about a potential level of debt that is insurmountable. The second one, 2 years. The third one, 1 year. And the point isn't actually how high these numbers are in the abstract sense. It's all to be related to the slave's property and their poverty. So this isn't getting loans based on good credit for the slaves. This is a big gamble. What is being asked of them is literally life and death. Speaking of which, they expect their master to punish them. He isn't a good, faithful man. This isn't a story of virtuous generosity. The slaves know that he is cruel. He reaps where he does not sow, which is a way of saying that he steals what does not belong to him. They know he is cruel. So what do the slaves do? Now, 2 of the slaves do what they think the master wants them to do. And what exactly does the master do? He reaps where he does not sow. So in other words, they steal. What does this actually imply? Well, they're not robbing a bank. The one takes the 5 talents the master left with him and made a profit of 5 talents. That's a 200% return on investment. He's doubled it. So he didn't put it in the bank and sit on 3% interest. There's no Wall Street or internet, so he's not firing up his computer and betting that a tech startup is going to hit it big. In this pre-market-based economy, this slave was handed 5 people's jobs and came back with 5 more. In other words, 9 people are now out of work. And the master rewards him by letting him keep it all. It's important that we fully grasp the idea of the day's wage and the year's income, right? We're not only quantifying a sum of money abstractly, or thinking of the individual's experience with the economy. We're talking about people's whole livelihoods being taken from them, and there is no safety net. This is life or death. This is like the Wolf of Wall Street. Right? It is theft. And further, remember, it's against Torah to charge interest. So even if we try to defend these slaves as simply investing wisely, we have to deal with the fact that what they've done goes against Jewish law. Now, of course, in history, this all gets complicated. The idea of banking and charging interest becomes quite normal, despite being forbidden. It's all complicated. But let's not hang our hats on history. Jesus is a Jewish rabbi telling a dark parable about exploitation. Otherwise, he's a teacher teaching them to break the law for what purpose exactly? You really have to stretch to make this one sound good. So let's dive into that last part, the end. The third slave stands up to his evil master. As we go through this story, I hope you hear just how unsettling everything is. It feels wrong. The master is terrifying. The slaves stealing from their neighbors are rewarded. Jesus seems to be encouraging usury, right? This doesn't make sense. This is why we go to talents and giftedness most of the time. It all becomes a metaphor, and so it can just fit and feel good, right? All that darkness can just disappear. But people who know Jesus shouldn't choose blissful ignorance. They must overcome what's unsettling about this story. It's like when Meg Calvin and Charles Wallace enter the town in A Wrinkle in Time. And it's this neighborhood, and all these children are bouncing balls in unison. It is super creepy. It looks normal. But obviously it isn't. Something is deeply wrong here. This parable, in its context, is like that sense of being in a nightmare and realizing it. Everything about this is wrong. It isn't real. This isn't a picture of what Jesus believes the kingdom of God is supposed to be. It is something else. And unfortunately, something far more familiar. The disciples are surrounded by darkness. Jesus has predicted the destruction of the temple, warned them of their leaders, and showed the world how those leaders partnered with empire to steal and oppress their own people. And then he tells his disciples a series of dark parables about a dark vision of the kingdom, of dark slaves of an evil master, stealing and oppressing for ill-gotten rewards. And the one who stands up is tossed out of town into what approximates the dump. In other words, the one who refuses to exploit his neighbors, who speaks up against his master's cruelty, is redlined downriver. We can wake from this nightmare, which comes in next week's gospel. That one will help us come back to these parables with new eyes, to see what following Jesus in the midst of darkness looks like. When we don't see Jesus present in this story. That's why these parables are so painful. We can't see Jesus in them, not as a knight on a war horse coming to topple our enemies in battle, or as a healer coming to calm all division and soothe our pain. And most importantly, we don't see Jesus directing us to God. I mean, that's his purpose, after all, how he sees himself as the one who helps reveal God's presence, because God is not that master. God is not keeping bridesmaids out in the cold. We have trouble seeing Jesus in these parables, but he's there. We're just looking in the wrong place. He's not the master or the ones making money to protect themselves by enriching themselves. He's the one who stands up, who's cast out and thrown away, left to die amidst polluted rivers, choking smog, and rejected refuse, not in the master's backyard, out of sight and mind. And we disciples, who have been taught that the first shall be last and the last shall be first, cannot stand for the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, which is an utter rejection of God's dream for the beloved community. We cannot stand for this distortion of human dignity, so we stand against the kingdoms of earth when they oppress and steal and cast our brothers and sisters into red-lined districts to suffer, just so we can feel safe, like our souls aren't hanging in the balance. This, my friends, is what it is to struggle within the darkness, hiding the light of Christ in favor of comfort and poorly formed unity. We lose our way, forget what we were taught, and throw up our hands in fear and frustration. And Jesus reminds us that he is here the whole time. Our lamps never run out of oil. We have everything we need. Just reach out.